Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire supported by Glenlivet Books. In an article he's written in the Calcutta newspaper this morning, India's foremost modern historian and one of the country's most highly regarded political commentators has said that the Gandhis must immediately retire from politics. Joining me now to explain his views and what brings him to this fairly dramatic conclusion is the author himself, Ramachandra Guha. Ram Guha, in an article you wrote for the Calcutta paper, The Telegraph, this morning, you say, and I'm quoting you, "I believe that for the good of the party, as well as the good of Indian democracy, the Gandhis must not just exit from the party's leadership, but retire from politics altogether." I'll ask you in a moment to explain what brings you to this conclusion, but can you first confirm you want the entire Gandhi family to immediately retire from politics?
Well, I am not a member of the Congress party. I'm merely a commentator and an observer. So it's up to them what they want to do. But it's manifestly clear from the steady and almost irreversible decline of the party under their leadership, as manifest most recently in this wipeout in the 5 assembly elections for them in every state, that they are unfit for the job of leading the party. I've also in my article explained why the Gandhis are a gift that keep on giving to the BJP and Modi, how they allow Modi to shift the discourse into the past and so on. So it's just objective analysis by a scholar. The Gandhis are bad for the Congress politically, and so long as the Congress declines, it's to the benefit of the BJP, which for me, as someone who believes in democracy and pluralism and institutional robustness, is a problem, because I think the BJP is leading the country down the path of disaster, and we need a viable opposition.
I'll come to the reasons behind your conclusion in a moment's time, but just so that the audience is clear, you stand by what you've written. The Gandhis, all three, Sonia, Rahul, Priyanka, must retire from politics immediately.
That's if the Congress wants to revive itself. As I said, I'm not a member of the Congress party. It's quite unlikely they will heed my advice. I've said similar things in the past, perhaps in not such a categorical manner. But it's manifestly evident that the Gandhis do not know how to revive the Congress party. That's the first thing that is very, very clear. And so long as they are in charge of the party, they are only helping Modi and the BJP. It's completely in the interest of Modi and the BJP to have the Gandhis at the head of the Congress party. In fact, cynics might even say there's some kind of match fixing going on.
Absolutely. But your sentence that I quoted is specific. They must not just exit from the party's leadership, but retire from politics altogether. That's what you're saying. Retire from politics altogether.
Yes.
Okay.
If they believe in the good of the party and the country.
For the good of the party and for the good of the country, all three Gandhis, Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, Priyanka Gandhi, must retire from politics altogether.
Correct. That's my view.
Let's then come to your reasons for saying they must retire. You have several, and I'll take you through them one by one. First, you write, their very presence in the Congress makes it easy for Narendra Modi and the BJP to deflect attention from the government's failures in the present by resorting to debates about the past. For those who haven't read your article, can you explain that point a little further?
Karan, if independent observers like me and others talk about the draconian misuse of laws like UAPA, the suppression of the press, the intimidation of independent journalists, the harassment of NGOs like Amnesty International, Modi will say, what about Indira Gandhi in the emergency? If Rahul Gandhi talks about Rafale, then he's asked, what about your father and Bofors? If questions are raised by credible defense analysts about the steady Chinese encroachment on our territory, that so long as the Congress is around to raise those questions, Modi will say, remember Nehru in 1962. So as long as you have a descendant, now it's a complicated matter which would require independent show to explain, namely that Nehru, and Indira and Rajiv left behind legacies that are mixed, partly positive, partly negative. But so long as a direct descendant of those three prime ministers is heading the Congress party, it's only the negative aspects of those legacies that will be highlighted, focused upon, and repeatedly reiterated by the party in power to deflect attention from the mismanagement of the economy, of our security position in the present. That's very obvious. I mean, you look at the games the BJP plays. Look at how often they resort to history. Look at the BJP IT cell and how often they dwell on the past and the crimes alleged or real of Nehru, Indira, and Rajiv. All of this would stop if someone called Gupta or Sharma or Ahmed or Engineer or Varghese was in charge of the Congress party.
Your second reason is that even though the Modi government's performance is underwhelming, and that's your precise word, it's in pole position to win in 2024 simply because in 191 seats, the opposition is the Congress, and Congress can barely win 16 of those seats, i.e. 8%. That is what Congress won in 2019. Only a reinvigorated Congress party can do that, and that requires the Gandhis leaving politics.
Yes, and there are several reasons for this. One is, of course, as the recent assembly results show, the Gandhis are incapable of providing focused, credible, and effective leadership to their state units. Because in Uttarakhand and Goa, as I explained, there was deep disenchantment with the ruling BJP, and the Gandhis, under their leadership, the Congress could not translate that disenchantment into effectiveness at the hustings. The other reason, Karan, is that general elections are increasingly presidential. And since the Congress still has a fairly large footprint across many parts of India, once the Congress is positioned as the most important of the opposition parties, Rahul Gandhi becomes the default prime ministerial candidate. And of course, that is utterly to the advantage of Narendra Modi. Now, maybe as some observers like Yogendra Yadav argue, it will be even better for the Congress to die altogether. Not just for the Gandhis to exit politics, but the Congress to go extinct. But that's not going to happen. So in my view, the only practicable option is for the Congress to find a new leadership. And actually, that can only happen by the Gandhis voluntarily exiting, because as we know, they have control over the party, over the finances, over the organization, over the ideology, and it's hard to see a palace coup. Just as it's hard to see a palace coup against Vladimir Putin, much as that might be desired, it's hard to see an authentic rebellion getting rid of the Gandhis. And maybe finally they should wake up. And if they actually care for the country, if they actually care for their party, which they claim to do, they should see that they're a burden, a hindrance, not just to the party, but to the revival of Indian democracy.
A third reason why the Gandhis must go is because, as you put it, today's India will not accept fifth generation dynasts at the head of what you call the country's most storied party. You write, and I'm quoting you, living as they do in the close circle of their sycophants, the Gandhis have little understanding of how Indians in the 21st century actually think.
Yes, absolutely. Just look at the most recent set of assembly elections. Some observers have rightly concluded that if you're looking at individuals, the three major winners in these 5 assembly elections, in whatever order, let's say in my order would be Modi, Adityanath, and Kejriwal. What is common between the three? They're very different personalities, different kinds of characters, different philosophies of governance, or dare one say misgovernance. What is common? All are entirely self-made. No one had an ancestor in politics. That is why they appeal to people, because young voters think, ye hamare liye hain. This kind of rise of the self-made person is ubiquitous across many sections of the Indian economy and Indian society. It's true of films. It's true of sport. It's true of music. it's true of entrepreneurship, and it's true of politics. Apart from the three individual winners in the recent polls, if you think of the impressive electoral performance of someone like Mamta Banerjee, for example, right? She's also completely self-made. Naveen Patnaik, though he may be Biju Patnaik's son, he was never promoted by his father. Actually, he abandoned, as you know, a successful career as a designer in Delhi to go and serve the people of Orissa. He has no family, he has no children, he has no wife. So I think this is, and so in any case, Indians today, because they're less feudalistic, are more inclined to trust, follow, and admire self-made politicians. Secondly, in any case, they'd be suspicious of the Gandhis. But when the Gandhis come forever pointing to their lineage, repeatedly mentioning the sacrifices of Indira and Rajiv and Nehru, and so on and so forth, this irritates people even more. Their entitlement, their sense of privilege, their arrogance becomes even more glaringly obvious when they boast about their lineage.
Now, there are two further hints in your article as to why the Gandhi should go. I'm going to put them to you one by one in the hope that you'll expand on them. First, you write, and I quote, whether they know it or not, whether they sense it or not, the Gandhi family has become active facilitators of Hindutva authoritarianism. People will wonder, what precisely do you mean by that?
I mean, the electoral results over the last few years. The recent assembly elections, what happened in 2014, 2019, it's very clear that Modi and Shah are delighted that the Gandhis are in power. In fact, they make it a point of attacking Rahul Gandhi so that he thinks he's important. And people, the chamchas around him, the echo chamber around him, thinks that he's the real alternative Modi. But when it comes to an election, we see what kind of alternative he is. In UP, it was supposed to be Priyanka Gandhi's coming out party. She was the Brahmastra, the last and the most deadly weapon. And what did she get? 2.4% of the vote, and the seat share went down. Now, it's to an 8-year-old who studies statistics, it will be clear that whenever the BJP comes up against the Congress, they win at election time. So, and what does the BJP do when it's in power? I talk in my article in one paragraph, but at greater length in other columns of mine, which don't deal with the Gandhis, about the damage the Modi regime has done to our economy, to our social fabric, to our place in the world, to our natural environment, and to our moral fiber and our constitutional ethos. So if, God forbid, we get 5 or 10 more years of the BJP, this India will not just be unrecognizable. It will not just be more polarized and more communal. It will be poorer, more vulnerable to outside attack, less treated with contempt by the world. We'll become a state like Russia is now, and that dreadful eventuality can be averted only if there's a vigorous, sustained opposition to the Modi regime that is electorally successful. And other parties in their limited spheres have proved that. The Aam Aadmi Party proved that most recently in Punjab. The TMC has proved it in Bengal, the DMK in Tamil Nadu, the BJD in Orissa, and so on. So other parties are willing to take the fight to Modi and Hindutva, and sometimes actually succeed. And that's why I say that the Congress, the Gandhis at the head of the Congress, presiding over a period of steady decline, which corresponds to the steady expansion of the footprint of the BJP at the expense of the Congress, is clear evidence that they are facilitators. The Gandhis particularly are facilitators of Hindutva authoritarianism. That's the facts.
Now, there is yet one more reason in your article, and once again, there's only a hint, and you call it their lack of political intelligence. What do you mean by their lack of political intelligence?
What the statements they make? I mean, if you look at, I already said that, in 2000, when Rahul Gandhi was leading the Congress campaign in 2019, the obvious thing to say would have been, "Achhe din kahan hai?" Where are the jobs? Where is the economic growth? Where is the building of schools, hospitals, and so on and so forth? Instead of which, Rahul Gandhi got it in his mind that he would accuse Modi of personal corruption, which is something people wouldn't buy, and it became all chowkidar chor hai. And of course, this coming from the son of Rajiv Gandhi, who lost the election because of the Bofors scandal, was absurdly ill-chosen, this kind of metaphor. More recently, if you look at his speeches in Parliament, even when he makes some good points, as in the last speech where he talked about the influence of Adani and Ambani and the growing unemployment, it became my father did this, my grandmother did this, my great-grandfather did this. And that completely nullified any impact the other points in his speech might have made. Let me give you one last example, because these are sound bites that travel widely on social media. You know, a statement taken out of context can have a devastating effect, a negative effect. I'll give you a last example. In my home state, Karnataka, where I'm speaking to you today, Karan, some weeks ago, there was a completely unjustified and shocking ban on children wearing a hijab, and actually sometimes even adult women and even women teachers wearing a hijab to school. And when the controversy broke out, Priyanka Gandhi's statement was, women should be free to wear a hijab, a ghungat or a bikini. Now, it was such an insensitive statement. It would only come from someone who is generally hanging around in the south of France, rather than talking to ordinary Indians who think about how people should dress. You know, in the context, it was such an elitist statement, you know, unconsciously elitist statement that revealed the kind of lives the Gandhi siblings have led. I feel some sympathy for them at a personal level, because they have known terrible tragedy, their grandmother, their beloved grandmother being assassinated, their adored father being assassinated, growing up in a sheltered environment, only meeting certain kinds of people. But they're really children. They're naive and spoiled, and dare I say it, stupid children. So while I may have sympathy with the circumstances of their upbringing, I can have no sympathy for the consequences of what they do in politics, because that's hurting my country. It is a country all of us care about. It's democratic, plural traditions. And they are, in that sense, sympathetically, you would say they're politically naive. More objectively, you would say they are, as I said in my article, facilitators of Hindutva authoritarianism.
In fact, in a nutshell, when you call them stupid children a moment ago, what you're saying is they don't know what to say, nor do they know the right idiom for saying it. They're out of touch, and there's no connect with the people whose votes they want.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, just contrast the kinds of remarks they make, Karan, to the speech Kejriwal made yesterday after Aap won in Punjab. I'm not by no means an unqualified admirer of Kejriwal. He's a cunning, crafty man who believes in a cult of personality just as Modi does. But he knows what politics is about. He knows how to fight elections. He knows how to win elections. And when the election is won, he knows what kinds of things to say. He spoke about Bhagat Singh, he spoke about Ambedkar, the two names that mean so much in Punjab. He talked about schools and hospitals. Anyone watching this program who is an admirer of the Gandhis and thinks that they have a great political intelligence, contrast what they say, how they say, and when they say what they do with Kejriwal's victory speech in Delhi yesterday, and you'll get a sense of how utterly unsuited the Gandhis are to run even a municipal political party, let alone the Indian National Congress.
Now, this is not the first time that you've launched a pretty devastating attack on Rahul Gandhi. You first did that, if I'm right in saying so, on the 26th of January 2013. At the time, again, you were writing for the Telegraph, you called him a well-intentioned dilettante, and you said that if ever he became prime minister, the nation shall not be in safe hands. I get the sense that you believe the biggest problem of the three Gandhis is Rahul, A, because he lacks political skills and charisma, and B, because of perhaps the influence he has on his mother and his sister. Am I right?
No, you're right in my being consistent in my views on Rahul Gandhi, in my being, if I dare say, prescient in his utter unsuitability for winning elections. I said that in January 2013 when the UPA was in power. But the more I think about it, the principal culprit is Sonia Gandhi. Because she runs the party with an iron hand. The children are instruments of her will. She is a dynasty fundamentalist. She thinks the Gandhis have a divine right to occupy the throne in Delhi. She somehow believes that Narendra Modi is a usurper, or Shah Suri to the Mughals, and her darling Mughal children will return to occupy the throne of Delhi. So it's really the person all of them, so I have no sympathy for Sonia Gandhi. I have some sympathy for Priyanka and Rahul because of the circumstances I've described. But what Sonia Gandhi has done over the last 7 years, after the defeat in 2014, which should have been a wake-up call to revive and renew the Congress, is what Sonia Gandhi has done is only to consolidate her family's hold. When, after the defeat in 2019, Rahul Gandhi felt a twinge of conscience and resigned from the presidency of the party and said, he said it could be a non-family member. Sonia Gandhi came in, put her foot down, took over as acting president, and has been acting president 900 days later, with the view that if the Congress somewhere wins at least one election, her son will come back as president. So actually, though all are responsible for the mess the Congress is in, all are facilitators in small and large ways of Narendra Modi and the BJP, the principal culprit, I believe, is Sonia Gandhi.
And the principal reason she's the principal culprit is that she believes she and her children, just like her husband and her mother-in-law, have a sort of divine right to rule. That they were born to lead this country, and anyone else who steps in, as you said, is a usurper, or like Shah Suri to the Mughals.
Yes, and one footnote to that. Also, unlike Rahul and Priyanka, Sonia has known electoral success in 2004. She did play a role in bringing the Congress back to power. And because she played a role in keeping the Congress in power, many senior leaders dare not take her on when she promotes her children, even though they know what she is doing is disastrous.
But she too has lost whatever political touch she had in 2004 or again in 2009. She also is incapable of reviving Congress.
Because she doesn't know how the country is changed. And clearly putting her children in charge is not the way forward. I mean, maybe somewhere they care for the country, which is why I wrote that article. I hope that they care for the country and they can see where the country is going today. And the best service they can do the people of India is to retire from politics.
So this is not your language, but a bit like an incubus, the three have to be got rid of, or they must voluntarily leave, because otherwise the party will never recover.
Yes, and Modi and the BJP will go from strength to strength.
The interesting question is, yours is not the first voice to have called for the Gandhis to leave, though clearly it is amongst the most recognized of voices who's made that call, and you made it more forcefully than absolutely anyone else. And I will add that in this interview, you've made it yet more forcefully than you did in your article this morning. But you must have asked yourself this question: why won't the Gandhis go? Or rather, let me rephrase it. What is it that keeps them in politics despite their repeated failure?
Well, this is pure speculation. I have no window into their brains and their hearts and how they think and how they feel. It could be that they control the money. It could be, as I've said, that Sonia Gandhi believes is the destiny of herself and her party. It could be they fear, legal consequences if they exit from politics, not just because of Robert Vadra, but, the kind of large properties that the National Herald, owns and has acquired. There could be several reasons. I wouldn't speculate. It could be, as I said, it could be control over the money of the party. It could be a belief in destiny. It could be a fear that they not only lose their political relevance, but be subject to legal harassment if they exit politics. It could be any of these. But that's it. But that is mere speculation. What is hard fact is that the Gandhis are an impediment to the revival of the Congress, and the Gandhis are a blessing to Modi, Shah, and the BJP. Those are hard facts.
The amazing thing is that there are many voices outside Congress saying that the Gandhis should go in the interest of the party, the interest of the country. No one within Congress says it unless they want to leave the Congress first. Yeah. Within Congress, the only voices you hear are voices of loyalty to the family. Serving congressmen publicly express loyalty to the family. They never express dissent. They never question the family. How do you account for that?
Well, it's become a party of chamchas and sycophants. Some of them don't want to have, they grumble in private, but they have 2 years of their Rajya Sabha or their Lok Sabha term to run. Several people in private have agreed with me in the past also. I've said, you're right, but we won't lead a revolt. But that's what the Gandhis have done to the Congress. And to be fair to Sonia Gandhi, this process was started by her mother-in-law, Indira Gandhi, who was the person who converted a great political party into a family firm. And abject loyalty, chamchagiri, sycophancy, leader worship became intrinsic to the DNA of the Congress. The Congress still has some good leaders. It still has some state units, robust state units. The people in the state units do not want to challenge Rahul Gandhi because they want to consolidate their place in the state. So Siddaramaiah and Shiv Kumar in my state, Baghel in Chhattisgarh, Gehlot and Pilot in Rajasthan lack the kind of, you could almost say, reckless ambition that Modi had when he tried to move from Gujarat to the national plane. That may be the reason they don't challenge it, which may be why they don't challenge the Gandhis, which may be why the only way the Congress can revive is for the Gandhis to see that not just the kind of writing on the wall, but to recognize that it's in the interests of the party and the country they profess to love and serve to retire from politics altogether.
That's really what you're saying to them, aren't you? You're saying to all three of them, if you love the party that you consider yours, if you love the country that you say you want to serve, then the best thing you can do is retire from politics.
Yeah, can I say just one last thing, Karan? They can make a life out of politics. Priyanka has her children. Rahul has many interests, I'm told, in the outdoors and, sports and so on. Sonia likes classical music. She has her grandchildren. There are many things you can do outside politics to fulfill yourself. Because clearly they will never get power in Delhi again. That's a fantasy. The idea that Modi is Sher Shah Suri to the Mughals is an utter fantasy. So recognize the reality, make a new life for yourself. And I said, I feel some sympathy for the children because they are the instrument of their mother's will. I mean, Rahul Gandhi could have been living abroad, with a kind of romantic partner he desired, following the interests he wanted. Priyanka, I'm told, is interested in religious literature, Buddhism. She has children. Sonia has grandchildren. So there is a life they can find for themselves outside, politics. But they should really, in the interests, again, as I've said several times in this interview, in the interests of the party and the country, both of which they profess to love, they should leave politics.
My last question, although you made an extremely forceful case for the Gandhis to go, there's little chance, I suspect, of them packing up their bags and leaving. In which case, what is the future for the Congress party?
Well, I think steady decline. There may be other alternatives that might come up. In state after state, where they once either prominent or a major challenger, they have disappeared, starting in Tamil Nadu in 67, then of course West Bengal later, then you had UP 77, then UP, Bihar, Gujarat, they haven't been in power for almost 30 years. Uttarakhand and Goa, where they can't even regain power. The next state may be Himachal, Gujarat will continue, and so on and so forth. So the future for the Congress is really bleak. So long as the Gandhis are in control, that's very, very clear. And that should be clear to everyone, whether they're in the Congress party or outside.
Ram Guha, thank you very much indeed. I don't know if the Gandhis will heed your advice, but certainly this will be something that will echo in all the drawing rooms of the country, and it's bound to reach their ears. I thank you.
Not just the drawing rooms, Karan, not just the drawing rooms, the streets, the paras, the factories and the fields, not just the drawing rooms.
In which case, the voices of the Indian people channeled through this interview, and more importantly by you, cannot but succeed in reaching the Gandhi years. The only question is, how will they respond to those voices? Take care, stay safe.
Thanks, Karan.